Hey everybody, Beth Helvey, Michael Saunderson Company. I hope you are doing well today. So we're talking about appraisals. And let's start off by defining what an appraisal is. Appraisal is when the lender sends out an expert, an appraiser, to determine the value of a property. An appraisal is, typically speaking, a visual inspection of the house. What kind of floors do you have? Cabinets, countertops? Are there any stains on the ceiling? Do you have a pool? Do you have a fence? How big is it? All of that. It's typically a visual inspection. They do not go through and do a proper inspection like your home inspector does. They're not going to crawl up in the attic. They're not going to, hi Lori, they're not going to get into your crawl space if you have one. They're not going to typically test things. And by typically, I mean for conventional loans. An FHA, VA, and USDA appraiser will do a few things, hi Bob, like open and close windows, open and close doors. They may turn on the AC, things like that. Conventional loan does not. It's a visual inspection. They really don't even touch anything. So whether you're the buyer or the seller, hi Nicole, the property doesn't appraise. What does this mean? Well, you have three choices as a buyer or as a seller. When a property, whatever the property appraises for, is the amount of money that the loan will be. So if you have a $500,000 house and it appraises for $495,000, your lender will approve a loan based on the $495,000 amount, okay? Which means that you've got a difference of $5,000. There's a few options here. The most obvious one, and the one that a lot of people do, is they ask the seller to lower the price. You can do that. Seller can say no. Sometimes the buyers will come up with the money on their own. Sometimes they're just fine with this. They love the house so much. Maybe they disagree with the appraisal. I've seen that happen. Maybe they don't care. They don't think they're going to move for 20 years. They're not worried about a few $1,000s. Sometimes what happens, which actually happens quite a bit, is that the seller and the buyer will meet in the middle or somewhere and say, I'll give this much, you give that much, and we have a deal. Now, your loan is still going to be based on the appraised amount. The extra is cash that you and or your seller are coming up with. Seller, your property didn't appraise. What does that mean? Well, you have those choices. You can say no. Seller can always say no. I don't care what this appraiser said. I'm going to sell my house for $500,000. I don't think it's worth $495,000. I think that appraiser's crazy. And I've heard that. Hi, Don. Hi, Adam. Now, if it's a conventional loan, you can do that, because if you sell your property again with a conventional loan, then they're going to send in a brand new appraiser, and whatever that appraisal amount was goes away. Will a new appraiser determine a different price? Who knows? You know, if you don't go under contract for 3 weeks and your neighbor down the street sold for a really good price, maybe your appraisal amount will come up. Maybe it will. If, seller, you have accepted an offer on an FHA or a VA loan, then that appraisal amount stays in the system for 6 months. So if your property comes in under value, under the contract value, and you've accepted an FHA or a VA contract, then that means that if somebody else comes through and buys your property with FHA or VA, that appraisal price stays with the property. So you're going to be looking at the same numbers again. If seller, you're in that position, then you need to answer some questions about whether or not you think you can sell the property for the appraised amount. Is your buyer willing to come up with the cash that they need to close, or are you two willing to meet halfway? Especially if you're in an area where FHA and or VA is quite popular. We have price points here in Sarasota where it is not uncommon to see an FHA loan. Other price points not, because of course, don't forget, FHA only loans up to a certain amount. So it's not unusual to see that. The higher end properties don't see this. So this is what you're looking at. Conventional, if you want to take your chances and you don't want to meet the price, that's fine. So what does that mean? That means that if the bank says to the buyer, I'm only lending you money on $495,000 contract price, seller and buyer can't come to an agreement about that extra $5,000, the bank's not going to lend the money. They're going to write a letter for the buyer saying, I'm sorry, your property didn't appraise. We're going to let you out of the contract. And once you get that letter, that buyer gets their escrow back. So whatever amount of money they put down to hold the property, they get that escrow back. And by the time this happens, you could have been off market for 3 or 4 weeks. So you have to factor that in. Is it worth the whatever amount of money it is to have to start all over again? There are so many things that can happen. But essentially speaking, when an appraisal comes in lower than the contract value, you're entering into negotiation again, because your buyer has the ability to walk away. And buyers, you can. You can walk away from this if you need to. I've even heard of buyers sending over cancellation letters right away saying, I'm not paying for this. I'm not even going to negotiate. We try to not let them do that, okay, because there's no reason to start that, because it is a door for negotiation to try to work it out. But I've seen buyers do it, or try to do it even. And they do get their escrow back. Hey, John, that is something to be aware of. Okay, so that means you're off market, because by the time the appraisal is ordered, which is 2 or 3 weeks in, then the appraiser has to do their job, which can take a week. Then you're looking at not even getting the appraisal back for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then you have to negotiate, and then they have to come to the decision, and then the lender has to let the buyer out of the loan. So you have to think about that. There's a lot of things to consider if a property doesn't appraise. More often than not, in this particular area that I work in, Sarasota, Manatee County, when we do see an appraisal come in short, typically speaking, it's not by a lot. And I understand that for sellers especially, that's really, really difficult for them, because they were counting on that money to go wherever they're going. I get it. Buyers are upset, because now they're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen now? We have to go out and renegotiate this. Typically speaking, though, the appraisals that do come in low are not that low. Occasionally, I've seen an appraisal come in extraordinarily low. And there's things we can do if that does happen and we weren't expecting it, and we think that the appraisal is wrong, or we think the appraiser missed something or didn't have some piece of information that they needed. There are things we can do. It's a lengthy process, but there are things we can do. So in a nutshell, if your property doesn't appraise, you've got 3 options. The seller can come down in the price to the contract price. The buyer can make up the difference. Or the seller and the buyer can agree to meet somewhere in the middle. If none of these things happen, then the buyer can walk away and keep their escrow. And the seller has to go back on the market and hope that they get somebody else that comes along to put an offer on the property. That is a very simplified version of what happens for appraisals. It is something that we do prepare for. Typically speaking, I know before the appraiser comes if the property is going to appraise, because we know what the comps are in the neighborhood. So if you have any questions on this, feel free to leave me a comment or send me a message. I'm happy to answer any of them that you have. If you have any questions on real estate in general, please let me know. Send me a comment or send me a DM, and I'm happy to answer any of those questions at all. I love hearing your all's topics. So today's a beautiful day. It is, I think, 90 degrees because this is Florida. We're probably going to get some rain this afternoon because this is Florida. So if you get the chance to go outside and enjoy yourself, wear your sunscreen, drink lots of water, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.